Hi, this is Nick Lalonde, your host of What's Next, making your third act your best act. Today, you're going to hear from Mitch Peipert. Mitch spent the last 25 years as a CFO identifying strongly with his work. July 30th of last year, he made the decision to give up the high-paying job and status the role of CFO brings to transition to his third act of life. A year later, and he has no regrets and is busier than ever. What stuck out to me in my conversation with Mitch is his enthusiasm that his third act of life will be his best act yet. He's tapped into the fountain of youth after voraciously reading tons of books and blogs on longevity. Be sure to listen in when Mitch shares the 5 things that you need to do to maximize your longevity. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Mitch as much as I did. Hey everyone, welcome to What's Next, making your third act your best act. I'm your host, Nick Lalonde, and today I'm really excited because I have a special guest on the show, Mitch Peipert. Mitch, one of the things that really stuck out to me, and one of the reasons I was so excited to bring you on, is you've actually made this transition so far. You're about a year in to what we would call your third act. So remember, the first act is all about learning, right? The second act is about growing, accumulating, building. And the third act is about finding fresh purpose and identity. And so when I think about your past, right, you had a very successful past and would love for you to share with the guests maybe some of the things that you did. And then
Sure.
what you're doing now as you've transitioned into your third act over the past year.
Yeah. First of all, Nick, really great to be here and excited to dive in. I was a CFO for the last 25 years, kind of worked my way up the corporate ladder, like people typically do in my profession, starting with public accounting, became a CPA, went to grad school, and then, became a CFO and fortunate enough to work for some really great companies and some great CEOs. So really enjoyed that. Last year, I turned 65 and I kind of, took stock and realized that, I think I have that number that you need to retire to. And so I decided to, hang up the CFO shoes and trade them in for some part-time work. I've always liked writing, so I am now a content creator, brand ambassador and influencer for a couple of brands, and thoroughly enjoying it.
So I want to go back to that. You said, Nick, I was 65, right? And that really kind of hit me. Why was 65 a pivotal moment as you were making this decision?
Yeah, great question. Most birthdays never bothered me. I always feel so much younger than I actually am. I'm very active and, stay fit and healthy. But 50 was not a big deal, 55, 60, but 65 just seemed like a big number. You're already on Medicare. I recently became a grandpa. So all these things that kind of fit in with retiring and not working all came together as they sometimes do. And I thought, I've had enough, don't need any more pressure, and I can enjoy my life.
Has it been worth it? Has it been worth stepping away from the high paying job, the status of being a CFO and transitioning now to this third act? And sounds like you're doing some fun stuff as a brand ambassador, but has it been worth it
Yeah,
in
thanks.
reflection?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was fortunate to do well as a CFO, had a lot of successes. And, along with that, you have a lot of pressure. You have CEOs breathing down your back, board of directors, PE firms, investors. And I found I was answering to an awful lot of people. So, and, I had great relationships doing that, but you do feel the pressure. And I decided I did not want that anymore. For many years, identified my life as a CFO, and I really now no longer feel that strong urge to say, that's what I am all about. I'm a dad, a grandpa. I have a great relationship with my girlfriend. I, enjoy life, traveling, and being active. So that's how I currently identify myself as.
I once had a client say, Nick, I didn't know a good night of sleep until I sold my business. Are you sleeping better, Mitch, as a result of not having to answer to all these people?
That's also a great question because as you get older, you actually don't sleep as well. And I have this conversation with my buddies all the time. They say, you have zero stress in your life. Why are you telling me you're up for an hour during the middle of the night? So I just notoriously have trouble sleeping. But I just feel less pressure. For example, I don't set an alarm in the morning. I just get up when I want to get up. And that's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
I'm curious though, how did that go? You mentioned Nick, for a lot of my life, I identified as a CFO. So how did
Hmm.
that go as you separated that identity from being a CFO? Now you're a dad, is what you said.
Yep.
I'm a grandpa, right? I'm a
Yeah.
boyfriend. I mean,
Yep.
um, maybe I'm a pickleball player, right?
Yes, I
Uh,
am.
but but yeah, what's that like as you separated your identity from work?
Yeah, I mean, I worked for 40 years, CFO for 25. So when you do something that long, you feel that that is who you are. But, I've read a lot of books on retiring and transitioning and uh, just realized that, that was who I was then, but that's not who I am now. And so I am many things now to many people and enjoying, being in that role.
Would you mind sharing maybe some of the books that you read? Because I find it's a journey, right? I mean, sometimes
Mhm.
it can even last as long as 18 to 24 months after someone transitions away from work and into their third act before they
Mhm.
sometimes feel like they're no longer the CFO or the business owner. So it seems like
Yep.
you read a book and you woke up one day and said, "Hey, this is no longer who I am." But maybe it wasn't that easy.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I've read a lot of books and a lot of articles and blogs, and one was about your bucket list. Another one, trying to think. Oh, one was Die with Zero.
Yeah. That's a cool
So
book, isn't
that
it?
was a very cool book. It was and it's got a lot of positive reviews. It just opened your eyes to that you work this hard your whole life. You should not be afraid to spend your money and enjoy it. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
What were some of the things that you took away? I know it was written by like an old poker player, right? Like a
Yeah,
world
yeah,
champion poker
exactly.
player, something like
That's
that.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just that I put my kids through school and help them do a lot of different things, and I will, continue to do that. But is a point in time where it's got to be about you, and that's why you work so hard for so many years, so that you can enjoy your own retirement and not be afraid to travel or buy yourself, something that you've always wanted, or try new experiences. So, it's that time for me to do that.
And so, what does a typical day look like for Mitch? You wake up, the alarm isn't going off in the morning,
No,
right?
it's
So, you
not
wake
going
up when
off.
you want.
I'm
What are you
lazily.
doing from the start of the day till the time you go to bed? How are you spending your time?
Sure. Every day is different, but they're all enjoyable. I'll get up each day and start out going to the gym because it's 30 steps from my front door in my building. After that, have a nice leisurely breakfast sitting on my balcony overlooking New York City and watching the view. I will either play some pickleball or tennis, or if it's a nice day, I might go for a bike ride. Um, I'll see friends for lunch, for dinner. I'll babysit my granddaughter and, do some traveling. So each day is different, but each day is so much fun.
That is so cool. It feels like one of the questions I think is so important when someone transitions from their second act to their third act is
Hmm.
asking themselves first, when you think about your work, what does it provide you other than money and financial security? And
Hmm.
so the people I find that have a lot of trouble transitioning to their third act, maybe they don't have community in the same way. So it sounds like
Yeah,
you still have a lot of interaction. It sounds like maybe there's still that
yeah.
competitive nature that maybe you had in business where on the pickleball court, right?
Very
Um,
true.
what are some other things though that you feel like you got from work that you've satisfied in other areas now that you've transitioned?
Yeah, so great question. So, a lot of what you read about longevity is that you need to stay social. That might be one of the primary things you need in addition to eating right and getting exercise, but you got to be social. And so I have huge circles of friends where I'm kind of feel like I'm the main hub, like my group from college, my group from my first accounting firm. I've stayed friends with all these groups and they always look to me and they'll always say that. Like I just met a bunch of guys last night. I'll be the one to round us up and get us together. And, we do that several times a year with each group, and it's a lot of fun. I have a tennis group. I'm playing with these guys 25 years, and we go out, to dinners a few times a year in addition to playing tennis still. Um, so it's just nice to consistently have that social aspect. As far as getting that from work and extending it into my personal life, I've been a board member of a CFO organization called FEI in New York City. And, I still attend meetings and still network, more for pleasure now than for business. And it's just fun, being with people and getting to know them and interact with them on a regular basis.
Mitch, it's not often that I come across someone who has a background as a CPA that is
Hmm.
also the most extroverted person, or the the person who
Yeah.
gathers everyone in the friend group, right?
Yes.
So you're truly a unicorn in that sense
Well, thanks.
to have the CPA background, but to also be kind of the epicenter of your friend group. That's
Thanks. I appreciate that.
that's so important, though. I find a lot of folks when they do transition from their second to their third act, and let's
Hmm.
say they're not enjoying it, right?
Hmm.
I
Yep.
find one of the big things that's missing is mental stimulation. So
Yes.
high achievers often need to have
Mhm.
mental stimulation, and you don't find that on the pickleball court. You
Right.
typically don't find that sitting on a beach, right, with a
Right.
cocktail in your hand. You
Yep.
find that by going to those board meetings, like you just
Hmm.
mentioned.
That's right.
And
That's one
and you
way.
said,
Yep.
Nick, I'm really going for pleasure today. Can you tell me more about that? I mean, you're
Yeah,
actually going
sure.
for fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll go. There'll be a guest speaker. In order to keep up your CPA license, you need 40 hours of credit a year. So going to these events helps you get that. So there's interesting speakers. I'm learning something new. There's one on AI coming up, and that's always a great topic to learn about. And, I'm considering taking online courses to continue stimulating my mind. I also want to do some volunteer work once I get my schedule regulated. So your time fills up, and when I look back on my week, I wonder, how did I have time to work? It's just
Yeah.
your time really can fill up very easily.
And I just want to rewind too on just the feelings you had when you made that decision, right? So I think the first
Mhm.
thing that you have to decide is when is enough enough. And so
Yep.
you said, yes, I have enough money to make this transition.
Hmm.
But what was the day? Do you remember the day that you
I
said, hey, I'm
do.
doing this?
I
Where
do.
were you? What were you
Yep.
thinking and feeling at that time?
Yeah, it was July 30th of last year, and I just said I had enough of the pressures of being a CFO. And so I thought, reevaluated my financial condition and, did my next 30-year spreadsheet showing my income and expenses, and it looked good to me. So I thought, good time to stop working. Then a couple of very part-time opportunities fell in my lap, and I thought this is good to have some spending money for travel and going out and keeping my mind stimulated in the business world. And so I engaged with that as well.
And so leading up to July 30th, how much time had you spent thinking about this? Was it that you just woke up on July 30th and said, hey, I'm done and I'm going to run a spreadsheet and see if it works? Or was it, hey,
Yeah,
the conversation maybe started in January and it evolved from there?
yeah, no, it actually didn't come up until around then. Uh, I realized that was July, and in September I was going to turn 65, which I obviously turned 65. And to me, that just became a big number because that's when you start collecting Medicare, and you could collect Social Security, and there's so many different things that you associate with an older person. Because I remember when my dad was alive, when he turned 65, I thought, wow, he's a really old man, which, in today's day and age, when you're active, you really don't feel that, but mentally, it's a big number. So I just really got more serious about thinking I should retire and be done with the day-to-day stress of a high-powered job.
And so how soon after July 30th did you actually turn in your resignation or your 2 weeks and let the company
Right
know?
then and there.
Right then and there. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yes. Right then and
And,
there.
and so really, really important then to achieve financial independence or to know when is enough, because then you
Mhm.
can move quickly, right?
Absolutely.
On that number. Um, I'm curious though, what would you recommend
Mhm.
for someone
Mhm.
that's in their second act? Let's
Yep.
assume today as a high achiever, they're like you, where they identify with their work because it's been a
Mhm.
part of who they are for decades now.
Right.
They're really good at it, right? There's a lot
Mhm.
of people that you know, give them praise and recognition. And so that's something they
Hmm.
enjoy. They have a lot of community in this center, but they're thinking about, hey, maybe I want to transition to this third act of life. What do
Sure.
they need to start thinking about and doing?
So they should start planning in their mind, if not a written plan, of all the things they would like to do in retirement, whether it's travel or move to a less expensive place to live that might be more enjoyable for them. And just, kind of make a list of maybe a bucket list or things, hobbies that they enjoy. So I always knew that I wanted to stay active, and I have worked out my whole life and stayed in shape so that I can continue to do that and play tennis and pickleball, which I enjoy, and bike riding as I get into retirement. I also maintain social groups. You know, really continually see people in my personal life as well as business life. And, that way you have stimulating conversations. Just maintain that social aspect, which all studies show extends your life and leads to longevity. So, doing all those things, just staying healthy, eating properly. But as far as monetarily, just try to set up your finances. And, being a CPA, of course, I did that 30-year spreadsheet showing my income and expenses until, say, age 90 or 95, and had been maintaining that over the past couple of years, and finally realized, what, I'll be able to live that long and not run out of money. So I felt more and more comfortable with that.
Mm, mm. Mitch, what I find really interesting is I'm sitting down with folks and I'm first talking about retirement. This is just an observation I had over the last 10 years is
Hmm.
sometimes I would mention the word retirement and I would mention it specifically to high achievers, right? And
Hmm.
their arms would cross and their brows would furrow and they would say, Nick, we're never retiring. Or they'd say, we don't want to be like our
Yeah,
parents, right? They're thinking about their
right,
parents
right.
sitting on the couch watching the Wheel of Fortune for the next
Hmm.
20, 30 years.
Sure.
Do you think that this act of life, though, so your third act of life that we're saying you're in today, do you think
Hmm.
it has the potential to be your best one yet?
Oh, 100%. It's going to be my best one. You got to take all the experiences and all the things you've lived through and maturity, hopefully, that you've gained. And just this is the culmination of all of that. This is where you can utilize, all the connections you made, everything you've learned, all the life lessons, and either pay it forward and or use it, to be your best self. And so that's where I feel I am right now, and, thoroughly enjoying it.
Do you think many people feel that way as they get to their third act, or do you think you've
No.
just set yourself up for that?
I think I set myself up for that. I'm a huge planner, and so my whole life has been spent planning for, whatever is next to come as best I could. But this is a huge, topic of conversation for my friends and I, and basically anybody at my age that I speak to. And I asked, folks, when do you think you're going to retire? And either they'll say, I can't wait, or some people might say never, because they say, what am I going to do in retirement? They haven't cultivated hobbies. They don't have huge amounts of interests. Those are the people that truly identify with what they've done for work all those years. So what I would recommend is when you are, before you retire, start cultivating hobbies or come up with a list of desires and things that you really want to do and achieve, and things maybe that you haven't done before, like learning to play a new instrument or, traveling to a very unique place. And my list is so long that I don't even know if I'll have the time to do everything I want to do, but my days are full, and I'm really having fun.
That is so cool. I can see the optimism coming out of you as we talk about your third act. And you said, Nick, for sure this is going to be my best act of life. And
Mhm.
Mitch, if I look as good at you as at 65, I'll be excited. I know you've
Thank
been
you.
drinking from the
Appreciate
fountain of
that.
youth. Tell me more about the longevity piece, though. You mentioned it several times throughout our conversation. So I'm curious, what
Yep.
are you doing today to make sure that your quality of life in your
Mhm.
third act is really, really good?
Right. Well, I read a lot of books on longevity, and there's, I guess, like five things you got to do. You got to exercise and be active every day. And it could be as much as I do working out in the gym and these other things, or maybe it's just taking a walk every day, but you got to keep moving. Second thing is diet. You've got to eat healthy. can't eat foods that are going to shorten your life and cause diseases. So my entire life, my mom taught me this very early on, how to eat properly and, really take care of yourself. Um, Third thing is being social. That's one of the most important things, is having a big social life, interacting with people. Um, Another thing is maintaining a positive attitude. Each day I wake up and I have an app that you can, put in what you're grateful for. And so before I go to sleep, I put three things that I'm grateful for. And when I wake up, same kind of thing. So you're starting your day very positive. This trains your mind to not think negative thoughts like before you go to sleep. Most people do that. But if you think, what am I grateful for? And you can either do this in your head, or there's free apps where you can write it in a journal, and you feel good about your life. If you think of it in that way, when you go to sleep, you think of how fortunate you are. And being grateful can be for your friends and family, to, things as small as, I'm grateful I woke up today and I can breathe. There's people that can't do that. So, every day is a good day if you are grateful for all these little things in your life.
I love that. I love that. What is the name of that app, by the way?
It's called the 5 Minute Journal.
Okay.
Yep,
So such a small thing that makes
it
a
really is.
profound impact, right? It has a compounding
Totally
effect on your
agree.
life.
Totally agree with you.
How did you hear about that?
Um, Probably one of I go on a lot of blogs about health and about staying fit and longevity and all these types of things, and I think it was recommended in one of those.
Well, Mitch, I have one more question for you, and then we're going to wrap up here. This has been an
Absolutely.
incredibly engaging conversation, and I know that our
Same
listeners
here.
are going to take away a lot. My last
Great.
question is, knowing what you know now, is
Hmm.
there anything that you would have done differently over the course of your career?
In my career, I would say not. I was so fortunate to have mentors and great opportunities, which I took advantage of, and really worked hard and surrounded myself with great people, which is critical. Um, I don't think I'd change a thing.
Wow. That's a good feeling not to have any regrets over a successful 40 plus year career. And it
Yeah,
sounds like you felt like you made the right moves at the right time. And then two, just really good mentors, surrounding yourself with good people. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, and just got very lucky. I'm very fortunate and very blessed in that regard.
Wow. Well, Mitch, this has been so fun. Thank you for your time today and coming on What's Next. And I
Yeah,
hope you have a great rest of your day.
you too, Nick. Thanks so much. Really enjoyed this. It's great. Thank you.
Take care.